Hello and welcome to the Rolling Thunder podcast. Hello and welcome to the second episode of Rolling Thunder. Today I'm going to be covering a small patch that was released a couple of days ago. I did touch on it very briefly in the first episode, but I'm going to go into more detail today. And I'm going to talk about an article that Gaijin has released on the main War Thunder website concerning a Soviet P-39 ace. So I'm going to give a bit of detail, a bit of background on this pilot and the aircraft that he flew. And his name is Pokryshkin, and he was a P-39 pilot primarily. So in relation to this article, and in honour of this ace himself, I'm going to do a little bit of strategy and tactics on the P-39 Airacobra in-game. So I'm going to talk about the armament, the performance, and generally how this aircraft should be flown to maximise its effectiveness. So, let's get on with the second episode. Patch Perquisition. What's new and what's changed? So as I mentioned earlier, just one mini patch today, and this is server update 6th of March 2015. Even though it is a small update, it's quite an important one. So the first point of interest is the occasions where ground vehicles would appear invisible have been rectified. So in War Thunder, particularly the ground forces, there have been sort of issues with the spotting system. So the line of sight was a little bit messed up. So you could have a tank in front of you, driving across, sort of from one side of your screen to the other, literally a few dozen meters away, and it would sort of flash in and out of existence, a bit like in World of Tanks, where vehicles could suddenly appear and disappear, which is very annoying. It's one of the reasons I didn't enjoy the way World of Tanks played, because you'd have sort of magicians making the tank appear and disappear at will, and that was one of the things that really annoyed me. It broke the immersion. It made the game a bit of a pain, where you just have like shells coming across from an invisible source, and you had no idea what was going on. And this has always been something in War Thunder that I preferred. You have less of this vanishing act, but it did happen sometimes. I mean, not extremely often, but sometimes it would happen. Especially in urban maps where the line of sight wasn't always obvious, like the game's programming would make what you see and what the characters in your tank could actually see. They didn't always add up. So hopefully this little change should improve matters. Second, improved award calculation when using boosters. The effective multipliers will be higher. Now not only accounts for all battle actions but also mission rewards. For example, victory. This is also a big piece of news because the boosters really didn't do very much, because all they did was account for battle actions, as it says here. Battle actions like the things that appear in the bottom middle of your screen, like aircraft destroyed, plus 2,000 lions, plus 400 XP, hit, plus 24 lions, plus 2 XP or whatever. And battle actions really don't have very high rewards. And before this patch, that was all the boosters boosted, which meant the boosters didn't do very much. Even a plus 300 was sort of mediocre. But now the mission reward itself is being boosted. So you should see some pretty noticeable improvements to your after-battle scores with this update. And finally, achievements in battles, wingman and on hand, and corresponding wages now correctly count assists on ground units. So more good news. Wages are more likely to actually be completed because you're not being cheated out of them by sort of an oversight, shall we say. So that's server update 6th of March 2015. Military history. Battles, campaigns, and weapons of war. So today on Military History we're going to be talking about an ace that Gaijin have posted on their main page. This is Mr. Pokryshkin. So, a little bit of background on the man himself, then I'll provide some information on the current event in-game. So, Alexander Ivanovich Pokryshkin, born on the 6th of March 1913 and died on 13th of November 1985, was a top Soviet flying ace and a marshal of the Soviet Air Force, who was made a hero of the Soviet Union on 3 separate occasions. He officially shot down 59 enemy aircraft, including 3 German aces, 9 kill ace Hans Schultz, who was killed, 58 kill ace Helmut Haberda, who was also killed, and 56 kill ace Hans Elent, who survived. He was an advocate of the P-39 Airacobra, and he enjoyed flying it. Pokryshkin was the great tactician of the Soviet Air Force during the Second World War. He almost single-handedly fought to change the obsolete Soviet tactics that were in place in 1941, when the war started. Going against the totalitarian establishment and openly defying the totalitarianism-approved combat doctrine almost cost him his career and possibly his life. After openly criticising the official tactics that led to huge losses and teaching his fellow pilots new tactics he invented himself, he was grounded and scheduled to be court-martialed. However, luckily for him, the word of his inventions reached some superiors in Moscow, and instead of being court-martialed, Pokryshkin was awarded and promoted. Pokryshkin started the war flying the Mikoyan Gurevich MiG-3 fighter, in which he scored almost 20 victories. The unit was given the honour 16th Guards Fighter Regiment in 1942, in March. At this time, or soon after, the unit received some Yak-1s, in which Pokryshkin also scored victories. In January of 1943, his regiment converted to Lend-Lease Bell P-39 Airacobras, which, despite a persistent myth, the Soviets never used in the ground attack role. Soviet pilots liked this aircraft and found it quite competitive with the Messerschmitt Bf-109 and superior to the Focke-Wulf 190 in the low combat altitudes common on the Eastern Front. Pokryshkin really enjoyed the 37mm cannon's destructive firepower and the 2 upper nose-mounted 50 caliber machine guns synchronized to fire through the propeller. He claimed the cannon's trigger, positioned on top of the joystick, was impossible to push without moving the pilot's hand. So finally, he had his regiment's aircraft rigged so that a single button simultaneously fired cannon and machine guns. In his memoirs, he describes many enemy aircraft immediately disintegrated upon being hit by this salvo. He and his regiment were repeatedly asked to convert to the new Soviet fighters, such as the La-5 and Yak-3. However, Pokryshkin found the La-5's firepower insufficient, and personally disliked Yakovlev, so he never did. Finally, in 1944, he found an aircraft that he was willing to convert to, the Lavochkin La-7. One of his close friends, Soviet 50 kill ace Alexander Klubov, was killed in a landing mishap while converting to the La-7. The crash was blamed on the malfunction of the plane's hydraulic system. As a result of this, Pokryshkin cancelled his regiment's conversion to the La-7, and there are multiple reports that they instead began flying Bell P-63 King Cobras. By the Lend-Lease agreement with the United States, the Soviet Union was not allowed to use P-63s against Germany. They were given only to be used in the eventual battle with Japan. Thus, it is quite understandable that no mention of this appears in any official records. However, personal accounts of German pilots and flak crewmen who encountered P-63s in the skies of eastern Prussia, as well as the memoirs of one of the pilots in Pokryshkin's squadron, appear to confirm that claim. The aircraft he flew, in order, were the MiG-3, the Yak-1, the P-39K-1, the P-39N0, and the P-39Q-15. Later in the war, his squadron was given 5 La-7 aircraft with the inscription, "From the workers of Novosibirsk to hero of the Soviet Union Alexander Pokryshkin," but he did not fly them himself. His unit apparently flew P-63A or C King Cobras after the war, and not for the first time, Pokryshkin numbered one of his aircraft 100. Finally, one or more of the 9th Guards Fighter Division units may have eventually converted to the Yak-9P before Pokryshkin left the squadron to attend the War College in 1948. So that, in a nutshell, was Pokryshkin's combat career. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the event in which you can win his P-39, or one of his P-39s, specifically the N0. There are 3 stages to this task, and you have until March the 10th at 7 AM GMT to complete them, and the event started yesterday. So the first stage is destroy 20 enemy aircraft or ground vehicles. And if you complete this stage, you receive a 20% discount on the purchase of his premium P39 N0. You'll also receive a trophy with a chance to drop one of the following items: Best Squad Wager, Destroy Units Wager, 500% Research Points Booster, sorry, what a bit Brooklyn there, 500% Silver Lines Booster, 3-day premium account, or 120,000 Silver Lines. Stage 2, destroy 50 enemy aircraft or ground vehicles, and complete a teamwork achievement in 10 different battles. Then you can also have a discount, but a larger discount, a 50% off the purchase of his P39, as well as another trophy with the same rewards as the previous stage. And finally, Stage 3, destroy 90 enemy aircraft or ground vehicles, and complete the best squad 3 times. If you complete this stage, you will receive Pokryshkin's P39 for free, as well as another trophy, with a chance to receive one of the items, the same as the items in the last 2 stages. So, if you get out there and work hard and get kills and earn the required trophies, you can win yourself some boosters, some premium account days, some silver lines, and perhaps even your own Pokryshkin's P39. Weapon evaluation: vehicles, strategies, and tactics. So at the moment in War Thunder we have 2 variants of the P39, the N0 and the Q5, which are both 3.3 battle rating, both tier 2. There's also the P400, which I will cover after I've covered these 2. So the armament of these 2 aircraft is slightly different. The N0 is armed with a single 37mm M4 cannon with 30 rounds, a pair of M2 Browning machine guns with 400 rounds each, which are in the nose cowling, and 4 7.62 Browning machine guns with 750 rounds each in the wings. The Q5 is the same, except the 4 wing-mounted 7.62s are replaced by another pair of M2 Brownings in underwing pods. So the N0 is first. The P39N was the first variant to be mass-produced, powered by the V1710-85 E19 engine and a 3-blade Aero Products propeller with a 3.15 meter diameter. Some fuel tanks were removed from the wings on later models to reduce weight, and a connection for additional fuel tanks was installed under the hull. To increase flight performance, Soviet engineers often removed the wing-mounted machine guns, leaving just the 2 nose-mounted machine guns and the cannon. As this variant, Bell produced 2,095 aircraft, and most of these were sent to the Soviet Union as the Lend-Lease program got underway. And this was one of the variants flown by Mr. Pokryshkin. Next is the P39 Q5. The Q series became the most numerous and advanced of all the Airacobra family. It was a direct successor to the N series. The whole propeller engine group remained unchanged. The Allison V1710-85 engine, the reduction gear, the elongated shaft, and the aeroprop type propeller, which meant the flight characteristics remained virtually unchanged. However, a more efficient 4-bladed propeller was fitted to the series from Q21 to Q25, which obviously isn't featured in the game, since we only have the Q5 at the moment. However, the inefficient wing machine guns of rifle caliber were removed and usually replaced by a pair of Brownings in pods under the wings, but these weren't always fitted. As mentioned, Pokryshkin enjoyed using just the pair of machine guns in the nose and the cannon. The differences between the various Q series consisted mainly of the search for the optimum combination of armor protection and internal fuel tank capacity. Takeoff weight, range and load varied from version to version. Altogether, beginning with the Q1 and ending with the Q30, 8 series of the fighter were built, with a total number of 4,699 aircraft. Of these, over 70% were exported to the USSR. There are also a few reconnaissance versions with photo cameras based on the Q series. Despite being a close ally of the US, the aircraft was not used at all in Great Britain, because it was tested by the British and they determined that the high altitude speed characteristics were insufficient. And now the other aircraft which I mentioned is the P400. This is a slightly lower battle rating at 2.7. It's armed with a single 20mm Hispano 404 cannon with 60 rounds, and the same machine gun setup as the N0, 250 cals in the nose and 4 in the wings. So the P400 was a slightly different variant which did away with the 37mm cannon and was replaced with a smaller, lighter but faster firing British Hispano. In the RAF, the Model 14A fighters, as they were known, were given the designation Airacobra Mark I. In December 1941, the British Air Ministry decided to remove the Airacobra Mark I from service, so the P400 didn't see a lot of combat. I don't believe the P400 was used by the Americans. It saw a little bit of use with the British. Much the same as the other two, except the armament is a bit more reliable. Doesn't pack as much of a punch though. So, how do these aircraft perform in game, and how should you fly them? Well, now's a good time to point out that I am not an ace. I'm not up there with the likes of very skilled pilots like Grummels, for example. But I do have a basic understanding of tactics and strategies and the way certain planes should be flown. So the Airacobra, in realistic and simulated battles, is not a turn fighter. It turns better than some American planes like the Corsair, because it's lighter and the power-to-weight ratio is really good. But it's nowhere near something like a Spitfire or a Zero. Compared to a P-39, I'd say the turning circle is quite similar. But again, you want to play this aircraft to its strengths and not necessarily something that may or may not be an advantage. Because that's not, you can't rely on something you're not sure about. So, but what is certain is the P-39 is a very fast plane, especially for its battle rating. It's quite heavy, which gives it a lot of momentum, especially in a dive. The engine is quite powerful. I believe it's around 1500 horsepower, something like that. But it lacked a sophisticated turbo supercharger, so the power drops off very quickly over about 4,000 meters. But it's a good boom and zoomer, a good energy fighter. That 37mm cannon is very powerful, but the muzzle velocity is low, which means you need to account for shell drop quite significantly. So you need to aim above targets that are some distance away, and you need to really master your deflection shooting, because these cannons really need a lot of lead when you're aiming in front of a target during a sort of a turn fight. The P-39 flies quite nicely. It's a predictable, stable platform. It's quite balanced because the engine is right in the centre of the aircraft, which provides a lighter nose, so the nose does follow your input quite well, especially compared to some nose-heavy American aircraft with a big radial engine at the front. But if you're a simulated battle pilot, the mid-engine is a bit of a drawback in some situations because of the weight in the centre of the aircraft. The aircraft is prone to getting stuck in a flat spin, and it's very difficult to get out of. In fact, in the P-39 manual, it says explicitly that if you get into a flat spin, you should bail out immediately, because only the best of the best pilots had any chance of recovering from a flat spin, because the weight, the centre of gravity is right in the centre of the aircraft, so getting the nose down or getting the tail down is very difficult. So that is one major drawback with the P-39. If you get into a flat spin, it's almost impossible to get out of. But it's very fast, especially in a dive, and it's very good at zoom climbing. Sustained climb, however, isn't as good, because the power-to-weight ratio isn't as good as something like a Spitfire or a Zero. But the firepower is excellent if you can hit the target. Like I said, the 37mm requires you to be attentive. You need to keep an eye on what you're aiming at. You need to lead the target. And you should not hold down the trigger. Even though this cannon does have a high rate of fire, if you exploit that high rate of fire, you're going to get shots going all over the place. It's going to be like a shotgun, so you do need to tap fire. In regards to the machine guns, because you can't always rely on the cannon, the N0 has a pair of 50 cals of 200 rounds each, and the four 12.7s. Sorry, four 7.62s. The 12.7s are quite good, but the limited ammo is a drawback. The 7.62s at this tier, well, they're not going to be doing a great deal of damage, so you should not be relying on those. Of course, if you have to, then aim for the wings, possibly even the pilot. But focus your firepower, and don't be too sort of overzealous with the trigger. The M4 cannon does have 30 rounds, but if you hold down the trigger, it's pretty rapid fire, so boom, 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 your rounds are gone, so be careful with that. The Q5 is a little bit better. Aside from the cannon, which again has 30 rounds, you have 4 12.7s, but you do only have 700 rounds across 4 machine guns, which is not going to last very long, so you really need to burst fire those, or only hold down the trigger when you know you're going to get a good amount of hits in. Finally, the P400. This flies much the same because it basically is the same. However, the 20mm Hispano in the nose is a little more user-friendly. It's more of a traditional weapon. The shots don't go all over the place if you hold down the trigger. It shoots faster. It's a bit more reliable, but there's only 60 rounds, which is poor. If you've flown the BF-39 F2, I believe it is, maybe the F1, one of the early 109s only has a single 60 round cannon, and much like that, the ammo runs out pretty quickly. Apart from that, you've got pretty much the same machine gun setup as the N0, with the 4 rifle caliber machine guns and the 2 12.7s, except the 12.7s have a bit more ammo, 540 compared to 400, which is nice. So overall, do I recommend these planes? Yeah, maybe not to beginners. If you're new to War Thunder, the Hellcat is probably a bit more newbie friendly. Perhaps the P40, mainly because of the armament. The 650 cals are a lot easier to use than one giant derp cannon. But once you've learnt the ropes and you've got the idea of how to boom and zoom an energy fight, the Aerocobra's speed and zoom, climb and diving capabilities are second to none. It's probably the best tier 2 diver. It's basically a P47 one tier lower, but with less reliable firepower and, well, a less powerful engine. So it's sort of like a mini P47. So yeah, it's a nice plane, and I do recommend that you try it out. But as I mentioned, if you're brand new to the game, stick with planes like the Hellcat, the P40 and the Corsair until you're a bit more in the know with tactics other than simple plain turn fighting. So that's pretty much everything for today. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks for listening.